The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined.
Welcome back to Calculated Confusion Exposed. Today we are going to review the moon landing. 53 years ago in 1969, Neil Armstrong supposedly was the first man to step on the moon. Oddly enough, we haven't gone back to the moon since that time. Don Petty, an astronaut in 2018, did an interview explaining why we have not gone back to the moon. His responses are totally fabricated.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be...
NASA had a $25 billion budget in 2021. Back in 1969, they were able to make it to the moon on a $3 billion budget, but now we are being led to believe that it would be too painful of a process to go back. Also, what seems confusing to me is that according to NASA, Mars is 33.6 billion miles away from Earth, and we are able to send a rover there, but we have issues going back to the moon, which is only 240,000 miles away from Earth. Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut who was with Neil Armstrong, in a moment of guilt, reveals to a little girl the real reason why we have not gone back to the moon.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
These few points here should begin to raise question as to what really went on. But let's start from the beginning, a year after John F. Kennedy's 1961 speech on secret societies, which alluded to NASA's future deception. John F. Kennedy rallies the people for what's to come next with NASA.
The exploration of space will go ahead. Whether we join in it or not, we mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond. Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
According to History.com, the space wars occurred after World War II drew to a close in the mid-20th century. A new conflict began. Known as the Cold War, this battle pitted the world's two great powers, the democratic, capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union, against each other. Beginning in the late 1950s, space would become another dramatic arena for this competition, as each side sought to prove the superiority of its technology, its military firepower, and by extension its political economic system. NASA would be the spearhead on this fictional conquest. In 1958, the U.S. launched its own satellite, Explorer 1, designed by the U.S. Army under the direction of rocket scientist Wernher von Braun. That same year, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a public order creating the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, a federal agency dedicated to space exploration. It should be to no surprise that Dwight D. Eisenhower, NASA's founder, was a Freemason. Even the name and logo is riddled in deception. NASA in Hebrew means to deceive. The logo, if you look closely, appears to have the slit of a snake's tongue in it. Snakes are also used as a sign of deception from the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible. This is no coincidence. Manly P. Hall, who was a Freemason, said it best. The rise of television in the 1950s and 1960s was instrumental to sell their narrative. At a time when TV was just black and white, things would soon change. Although the first program televised in color, a variety show called Premiere, was broadcast in 1951, it wasn't until the mid-1960s, 1965 to be exact, that a network would air the majority of their primetime shows in color. That network was NBC. 1966 was the year that all three major broadcasting companies televised all of their programming in color. Not only that, but special effects in movies and TV shows were quickly advancing. This saw a major uptick in live-action science fiction movies. Wikipedia has a list of science fiction movies for every decade. The 1930s and 40s had 46 and 45 movies in their decades. Around the time of NASA's founding is when we see the increase. 198 science fiction movies were credited in the 1950s, which more than doubles the combined amount of the previous decades. The 1960s released another 196 science fiction movies leading up to the moon landing in 1969. We know that the government controls Hollywood and NASA is a part of the government. Please check out my video if you have not already. Between the movies and TV shows, you can see a clear agenda of the government's involvement to push the propaganda of space. During the boom of the television era, they use these shows to program you, hence why they call it TV programming, also the reason why you watch TV programming through channels, which you navigate through a remote control. Really think about the language of the words being used. The television at that time was also starting to become a staple in the American household, and with so few networks, many people use the TV as a trusted source of information. So around the time of the moon landing, no one had an ounce of distrust from the media, with this technology still being fairly new. The hundred of films and TV shows made were dress rehearsals, trial runs, for the 1969 landing. William Shatner, an actor on Star Trek, best explains the true relationship between science and science fiction, which will lead us into the examination of the footage of the moon landing.
Film. I have through your career and your writing and your acting, you've inspired so many people to enter the sciences. How do you balance science with science fiction?
They're both the same. The mystery of science fiction is what I'm talking about. Science and science fiction are essentially the same.
Thank you very much.
How do you prove a black hole? How do you know those gravitational waves proved the collision of two black holes?
Somehow, eventually, they are able to observe phenomena.
No, they can't observe. It's too far away. It's too theoretical. How do we know what they're saying is true? You know what it really is? It's all science fiction.
I was talking with a gentleman from Belcom, and we were discussing the lie. Everything he was telling me was different from what we were being told was the truth. And at one point I asked him, I said, man, you guys, you lied about a lot, didn't you? And instantly he said, no, we didn't lie about certain things. We lied about everything. I really don't think people realize how deep the lie goes.
Marcus Allen, British publisher of Nexus, a magazine of alternative politics, history and science, also questions NASA's engineering capability at the time of the launches.
The problem is the whole Apollo program was a complete fabrication in order to be seen to succeed in the Cold War. The myth of Apollo is what is holding NASA back from future space travel. It's a tragedy. We didn't go the first time, we can't go now, we've never been. They lied to us.
But if NASA didn't put a man on the moon, it would have had to fake the evidence. And its own visual images have done the most to fuel conspiracy theories.
Every photograph taken on the lunar surface is online, 5,771. Some of them are not particularly good, some are out of focus, some are light struck, some just don't show very much of interest, and some of them are very good indeed. And it's the very good ones I question. I do not believe they were taken on the moon. They were taken here on Earth.
Conspiracy theorists believe NASA faked all 6 of the Apollo moon landings and point to these NASA photographs as proof. Some of the most renowned claims suggest that areas lit from behind should be in dark shade, when in fact, they reveal full detail. In others, the shadows don't run parallel. Is this because they were lit by separate sources, suggesting film lighting? Despite being taken in space, no stars are visible in any of the Apollo photographs. Gravity on the moon is 1/6 of that on Earth, but when archive footage is sped up, the astronauts appear to be running at normal speed in Earth's gravity. And with no atmosphere on the moon, why does the flag seem to wave in a breeze?
Astronauts moving in slow motion is another hallmark of the Apollo TV footage. There is no evidence at all of any astronaut making a leap or a jump anywhere near a height commensurate with 1/6 G possibilities. But if they were actually simulating EVAs on Earth, they would then need help with their bulky heavyweight suits and backpacks in order to achieve the visual effect of moving around easily in lunar gravity. So enter wire supports. This is a tried and tested way of relieving weight from performers, or even flying an actor. Of course, confirmation that wires were used is in the detail. Here in this Apollo 14 footage, you can see a ping, a momentary glint. And again, run slowly. And once more. There are other examples too. This one is from Apollo 17 during the flag scene. You can see the ping at the top of the frame. In this footage from Apollo 16, we have telltale evidence of a slightly floating or dangling effect at the jump salute location. It's as if the weight is being taken off the astronaut's feet just a second or so too soon. Compare that sequence with an obvious rehearsal rig. The dangling effect is very evident. And here again, from the same mission, Apollo 16, we have an astronaut who is about to get up.
Give me a hand.
"Let me give you a hand," he says.
There goes bag. There goes another bag. Bag. Coming.
Look at it again. The astronaut is getting up with the wire taking the weight, relieving him of 5/6 of the Earth's gravity. A magic trick? No, just the help of a wireman. This is a slow-motion jump that would have been seen live on TV. And here it is at normal speed. The well-rehearsed, pre-recorded material was apparently slowed down by 50% when we saw it on TV. And yes, we've done the necessary work to establish that percentage.
He believes it's impossible that any of these photographs could survive a journey to the moon and back in the first place.
Photographic film cannot withstand the vacuum of space. So how did they get all these fantastic photographs we've been shown forever about Apollo astronauts on the moon when the film was not in a pressurized environment, let alone radiation protection?
Conspiracy theorists believe this is their trump card. Not only would it destroy film, it would kill the astronauts. The Earth's magnetic field protects our planet from solar rays. But beyond this zone, deep in space, is where conspiracy theorists believe astronauts would be vulnerable to radiation's deadly effects.
The moon is irradiated by the sun constantly with terrible heat, and of course there's cosmic radiation, and then there are micrometeorites that travel 60,000 miles an hour that would go right through the camera, the film, and of course the astronauts themselves.
After leaving the Earth's atmosphere, the astronauts rocketed through the Van Allen belts.
The Earth is surrounded by donut-shaped rings called the Van Allen belts, which are filled with high-energy particles. The shape and size of these belts change in response to magnetic storms coming from the sun. Understanding what's happening during these events is crucial for protecting our technology in space. Magnetic storms can disrupt satellites, cause power grid failures, and disrupt GPS signals used for navigation.
Van Allen, he said it was a sea of deadly radiation. You would pick up a death dose just about the time you got through the Van Allen shield. You'd be cooked and you'd be dying.
These radioactive belts form a thick ring encircling the equator, thinning out around the North and South poles.
Until they get an engine that'll lift the life capsule surrounded by 6 feet of water or equivalent mass of lead, they don't even dare go through the Van Allen shield.
The future of space exploration, the emergence of private space sector and daily life in space. These are among the topics we discussed today with two special guests from International Space Station, Terry Virts, the current ISS commander, and Samantha Cristoforetti, the first Italian female astronaut in space. And what comes after the International Space Station once its mission is over? How do we ensure the presence of humans in space?
Well, that's a great question. The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to. And we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
In 1969, the public had little reason to question mankind's historic first step on the moon. After all, the achievement was a celebration of technological supremacy. America had finally won the space race. Mankind's first steps on the moon have become the epicenter of hoax theories. Conspiracy theorists claim NASA faced a formidable challenge with its primitive 1960s technology. Just 14 months before the Apollo 11 mission, Neil Armstrong test-piloted a prototype lunar lander. The result was disastrous.
Unfortunately, it went out of his control, and luckily he was able to eject before it crashed in flames. If they couldn't get a simulator to work on Earth, how in the world could they get the actual lunar module to work on the moon?
And of course I knew both Neil and Buzz. There was no provision for rescue. Had they made a faulty landing, they couldn't have got back. That would have been too ghastly to contemplate.
Conspiracy theorists question not only the technical capabilities of the landing craft, but also the computing power that guided it.
They didn't have the technology to do it. And the risk is too great. They could not afford to risk failure. They wouldn't allow themselves to rely on science and technology to get them there.
Another proof of the moon landings, according to the NASA supporters, are the images of the lunar surface sent to the Earth by unmanned probes in recent years. In 2009, the American probe Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter completed a full mapping of the lunar surface, sending back the images of what purportedly are the landing sites of the Apollo missions. Obviously, it's hard to consider these images as an actual proof of the landings when NASA itself is suspected of having falsified the pictures from 6 entire missions to the moon back in the 60s. Today, a kid armed with Photoshop could produce images similar to these in no more than half an hour. Somewhat different is the case of the Japanese probe, Kaguya. In 2008, this probe scanned the entire lunar surface, sending back altimetry data that allows us to recreate the exact morphology of the lunar terrain on a computer. According to the debunkers, the fact that the images generated by Kaguya show a terrain very similar to the ones seen in the Apollo pictures proves that the lunar missions were real. One example often used by the debunkers is the one of Hadley Rill, this large canyon carved on the lunar surface where the Apollo 15 mission allegedly landed.
E questo è il risultato. Ovviamente gli oggetti in primo piano non ci sono perché l'altimetro non riesce a definire anche i sassolini più piccoli, ma le colline sullo sfondo sono assolutamente identiche. Allora, come faceva la NASA ad avere delle fotografie quasi 40 anni fa di un luogo sulla Luna con la forma esattamente giusta che poi 40 anni dopo non siamo riusciti ad andare a verificare? Come faceva? Mistero.
In fact, there is no mystery here at all. As confirmed by this 1966 documentary, NASA had already sent probes to photograph the lunar landing sites from up close well before the Apollo missions had started.
Charting actual landing sites for the astronauts is the job of Lunar Orbiter. 2 of the 850-pound satellites have orbited the moon, photographing and mapping wide areas, sometimes sweeping as low as 25 miles above the surface. Here are some of the pictures helping to determine the height and slope of lunar mountains and the depth of craters.
So accurate had been the photographic surveys that NASA had been able to build a gigantic moon globe, which replicated the entire lunar surface in utmost detail. All it would have taken at that point was to film the moving surface of this globe, using, for example, this circular rail, to give the impression of really flying around the moon. Furthermore, for the Hadley Rail area in particular, NASA had built a 3-dimensional model reproducing the Apollo 15 landing site to the smallest detail. This 3-dimensional model was then hung from a ceiling upside down and was illuminated by special lights that simulated the sunlight. By filming the model with this special camera, which could get as close as a few inches to the surface, NASA was able to film the entire lunar landing approach as if it were the real thing. The images were sent to the monitors in the simulator, making them look like actual images seen from the window of the lunar module. This documentary from NASA explains how the lunar landing simulator worked.
To the left of the simulator is a 3-dimensional mosaic of the moon's surface. Through closed-circuit television, it presents typical lunar landing displays marked by craters, mounds, and boulders. The mosaic gives the astronaut a realistic feel for his final landing approach. Lunar module motion is simulated by moving the map up and down for vertical motion. A camera on a dolly track provides lateral movement. Lights around the camera lens simulate lunar lighting conditions. With these 2 simulators, a crew can practice the basic flight elements of the Apollo mission from launch complex to landing on the moon and return to Earth.
As one can see, the images produced by the simulator are so similar to those of the actual landing that the initial argument by the debunkers can be reversed. Not only was NASA able to replicate the exact morphology of the landing sites in the studio, but they could have, in fact, simulated the entire lunar landing using the very images from their simulator without the need of actually going to the moon.
Okay, now, you think you can ship off the...
Another piece of evidence for the lunar landings often mentioned is the moon rocks. All those samples of rocky material that the astronauts allegedly brought back to Earth from their missions to the moon. Being composed of different material than the Earth, claim the debunkers, these rocks are the tangible proof that man went to the moon. From the debunking site Clavius, we can read, "The lunar surface samples returned by the Apollo missions are considered by many to be the most compelling evidence that the missions were authentic." On its own website, NASA writes, "Moon rocks and common sense prove Apollo astronauts really did visit the moon." In reality, these alleged moon rocks by themselves don't prove anything. Even accepting that their composition is different from that of the Earth, we must remember that many meteorites originating from the moon have been retrieved in Antarctica.
Well, I got a phone call once, a fellow at the Smithsonian, and he said, "Jerry, we have now a meteorite which I just brought back from Antarctica, which is from the moon." A whole assembly of scientists attacked this object, and at the end of a year and a half, the conclusion was it was a moon rock. It was unambiguously a moon rock.
And it's certainly a curious coincidence that Wernher von Braun and some of his NASA colleagues visited Antarctica in 1967, exactly 1 year before the beginning of the lunar missions. As stated by the New World Encyclopedia, the expedition was one of the first to systematically search the ice surface for meteorites believed to originate from the moon for later use as a reference material. Nothing forbids that this reference material could have been later used as original after the Apollo missions. Furthermore, it is possible that the diversity of the lunar rocks was obtained with some special processing here on Earth, as suggested by Bill Wood, an aerospace engineer.
And then I think the vast majority of the hundreds of pounds of moon rocks that we claim to have are made here on Earth. They can be irradiated or exposed to a vacuum or modified in certain minor ways so that they appear slightly different.
In fact, in 2009, it was discovered that a lunar rock donated by the American astronauts to a Dutch museum was actually a piece of petrified wood. A cheap, earthly fake presented to the world as if it were a precious lunar rock. But even if these rocks really came from the moon, they could have been retrieved by an unmanned probe, and not necessarily by humans. Again, the same thing was done by the Soviets with their unmanned probes Luna 16, 20, and 24. Thus, in no case, regardless of their origin and composition, can the so-called lunar rocks be considered proof that man went to the moon. And one is left to wonder, why would NASA feel the need to state that the lunar rocks prove that we went to the moon, when they are the first ones to know that this is definitely not the case? Let's now discuss the actual lunar landings. We will start by examining the lunar spaceship, or LEM, which has allegedly brought 12 astronauts to walk on the surface of the moon in the course of 6 different missions. The LEM, or Lunar Module, is the vehicle that was designed to carry astronauts to the surface of the moon. But this very LEM raises so many questions that many doubt this vehicle has actually ever reached the moon. They suspect this is only a mock-up model sitting on a movie set instead. Seen from a distance, the LEM appears like a technological wonder, but once we get up close, we realize that it looks more like a mock-up model, somehow put together with steel tubes and papier-mâché, held together with simple Scotch tape. What immediately catches the eye is the large amounts of Scotch tape, haphazardly placed here and there, as if it were a...
Per esempio è che il modulo lunare è rivestito di lamierino, si vede addirittura che è unito con lo Scotch, quindi era un simulacro di cartapesta. No, non è vero, perché si va a vedere la documentazione tecnica, è salta fuori che il modo migliore per applicare senza aggravare il peso il rivestimento termico in modo che non venisse surriscaldato dal sole era di usare dei giunti adesivi invece della rivecchiatura che con la dilatazione termica avrebbero causato delle sollecitazioni.
But this explanation doesn't stand to scrutiny. As one can see, the LEM is full of metal rivets everywhere. There is therefore no explanation for the sloppiness in the construction of the lunar module, with the engines covered with aluminum foil, the external panels not even lining up with each other, and the Scotch tape that seems added at the last moment, just to keep together pieces that would otherwise fall apart. The lunar module cost over $2 billion at the time, which is the equivalent of $21 billion in... At this point, we are left with only one consideration to make. If it's true, like all this evidence seems to suggest, that someone at NASA decided to fake the lunar landings, they would have certainly needed to convince the astronauts to play their role all the way through to the end. It could not have been possible to fake the lunar landings without their full cooperation. And astronauts are some exceptional people, courageous and motivated by a deep sense of pride, which comes from constantly putting their lives at risk in order to advance the progress of science. It must have not been easy for them to participate in such a fraud, just to satisfy the need of the United States to affirm their leadership in front of the entire world. Let's then take a closer look at the story of the 3 most famous astronauts of all: Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, the historical crew of Apollo 11. On July 24, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins triumphantly returned from the most important mission ever accomplished in human history. They have just been on the moon. They are the first human beings to have ever visited another celestial body and to have safely returned from it. On the recovery ship, they are welcomed by President Nixon in person. After a brief exchange in front of the cameras, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are placed in quarantine for a few weeks of isolation. Then, on September 16, they appear for a press conference in front of the global members of the press, who welcome them with a standing ovation. Everyone expects to see three absolute heroes radiating with happiness and pride for their incredible achievement. But their faces appear somber, tense, somehow preoccupied instead. They seem uncomfortable, and there are several truly embarrassing moments during the event. When the three astronauts are asked the meaning of a mission that has brought mankind on another celestial body for the first time, the three don't seem too eager nor too enthusiastic about answering the question.
Many of us and many other people in many places have speculated on the meaning of this first landing on another body in space. Would each of you give us your estimate of what is the meaning of this to all of us?
And when Armstrong describes their achievement as the beginning of a new era, he seems more like a person forced to read from a script than someone actually convinced of his own words.
The entire program, it's a beginning of a new age.
Possibly the most embarrassing moment of all comes when the famous astronomer and journalist Sir Patrick Moore asks the astronauts whether they could see stars from the moon.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
But not one of them, surprisingly, remembers having seen a single star by the naked eye.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics.
Even Collins, who was left orbiting the moon while the other two descended on the surface, does not remember seeing a single star.
I don't remember seeing any.
This is a truly disconcerting fact, given that their colleagues from the Gemini missions, who flew in space a few years before them, recall the long hours spent looking at the stars.
We'd spend several hours just with our faces pressed up against the window at night with all the lights turned down low, and watching the stars.
Also, the astronauts from the shuttle missions, like, for example, James Riley, recall seeing literally millions of stars in outer space.
What are the stars like in space? Like, are they just brighter than on Earth, or how would you describe it?
They're brighter, but they're different. And a lot of things different about them. One, you don't have the atmospheric distortion, so they don't twinkle, right? So you see lots of points, and you see lots of points, and that literally millions of them.
One wonders where the Apollo 11 astronauts have truly been in the crucial 8 days of their mission, given that they don't remember seeing a single star by naked eye. Another surprising fact is that, instead of pursuing a successful career within NASA after their triumphant mission, the three astronauts suddenly decided to leave the space agency. A little over a year after their mission, with the Apollo program still in full swing, all three astronauts resign from NASA. Armstrong literally disappears from the scene, moves to the country, decides not to give any more interviews, and shuns the public eye. And when NASA celebrates the completion of the Apollo program, which has carried 12 men to the moon in the course of 3 years, the most important of all, Neil Armstrong refuses to take part in the ceremony. Buzz Aldrin also falls into a deep state of depression, which leads him towards the abuse of drugs and alcohol.
I thrived on addictive substances, alcoholism, and clearly that began to predominate in my unstructured life.
In 1973, he appears in a photo in Paris Match, definitely changed in his physical aspect. To the French magazine, Aldrin declares, "They think of us as heroes, but the moon has destroyed us." In a 1994 interview, Aldrin is asked to give some advice to the young people who want to become astronauts in the future. But instead of encouraging them and inspiring them with enthusiasm, he warns them against possible disappointments.
Space and its frontiers certainly are new and challenging, and because they're new and challenging, they're also uncertain, and I think anyone aspiring that as a career field has to be equipped with a lot of patience and the ability to cope with things not turning out exactly the way they may perceive that they would ahead of time.
Why would a man who has just accomplished the most important mission in the history of mankind warn young people against the risk of disappointments and failures?
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong.
Armstrong sometimes reappears in public, but it's definitely not to sing a praise for NASA. In a ceremony hosted by Bill Clinton in 1994, Armstrong makes an ambiguous and mysterious statement. While talking to a group of students, he mentions some of truth's protective layers that young people should try to remove in order to go on.
We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
Later on, Armstrong stuns reporters again when he refuses to take part in the celebrations of the 40th anniversary of the Apollo mission. In 2004, filmmaker Bart Sibrel produces a documentary called Astronauts Gone Wild, in which he interviews the astronauts from the Apollo missions and asks them to swear on the Bible that they really have been on the moon. We must keep in mind that in the United States, a sworn testimony filmed on camera can be used in a court against the person who has made that testimony. And in the United States, perjury is a crime that can even end you up in jail. We don't know if this is the actual reason, but it's interesting to notice that once Neil Armstrong realizes he is being filmed by Sibrel's camera, he refuses to swear on the Bible.
I wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the...
Even after Sibrel offers him $5,000 in cash to be given to charity, Armstrong still refuses to swear.
You have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. I have it taped.
It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to... Why not? Why won't you do it?
Buzz Aldrin also refuses to swear.
Why don't you swear? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
Sibrel keeps insisting and even insults Aldrin until the former astronaut hits him with a punch. But at the end of the day, just like Armstrong did, Aldrin also refused to swear. Michael Collins, too, the third Apollo astronaut, refuses to swear, and actually runs from Sibrel as if he had seen the devil.
Well, asking you to swear on the Bible that you orbited the moon.
Would you please go away?
Well, if you really orbited the moon, why won't you swear in the Bible that you did so? I just don't understand why if you orbited the moon, you wouldn't have a problem about swearing to the Bible on it.
Sibrel certainly doesn't have a pleasant approach, but if someone has really been on the moon, why not swear anyway? All you would have needed to do to get rid of the nuisance would have been to stretch your hand out and swear on the Bible. On top, Armstrong could have given $5,000 in charity by simply performing that act. But none of the three astronauts wanted to do it. Why?
You look like you're in a studio, maybe in Omaha, Nebraska or something. The shot is so clear. Is this a hoax? Are you really in space still?
I don't know. We're gonna have to do something.
This guy's doing a flip right here, and the guy next to him just reaches up and grabs a harness that's right on his hip.
I gotta pause it real quick. I'm gonna pause it because the funniest part to me, well, there's several funny parts, by the way. But the lady in the background with the hair, it's like, did someone not think that like we've got to make her hair look like that, right? It's got to be standing up, dude. It is hard as a rock. It's not moving.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this is we must be in space. Look at her hair. Like obviously, there's a thing called hairspray. Yeah. So anyway, I just think like, if you those that can't see it, unfortunately. But
we'll post it somewhere.
You can we'll post it somewhere, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It's the biggest crock of shit. But I'm gonna resume. Wow.
This guy's Superman back there.
Hey, here I come.
So they did zero production.
This dude is literally hanging.
Makes no sense.
Oh man, no, it makes no sense. He's literally got a harness on. You can see him.
And these are NASA
going back and
astronauts.
forth. I mean, yeah. I like how they're all wearing belts.
Yeah.
Well, here goes this guy doing a backflip,
and then gravity just like gravity goes away. He must have found a pocket.
Gravity goes away and he fell.
Yeah.
Or he got caught up in that harness he's wearing. Here comes the one with Senior.
Yeah.
In the background.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
And it's obviously
Here's an arrow,
a guy filming with a green tennis ball in front of a blue screen.
Right. Clearly, I mean, it's not even...
And then here's a clip of what they turned it into.
Here's his water particle. Yep. Wow.
This guy just disappears like, makes sense.
Yeah, I'm good to go. Hey, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we got back there? Another green screen.
And this guy just
The ones where they're doing the he's hanging his shirt like you can see
it's not even good.
You can clearly see the harness. It's like if you take your hands right now and you grab your shirt and you just pull out.
Yeah.
Like it's This one's my favorite right here.
Green
the guy
shirt?
goes to reach for
Yeah.
Yeah, what a doofus.
But watch their thing at the end. I think this guy's always in it, man. He's the biggest clown. Yeah.
He's the worst. Like they got to be like, hey Bob, we got to get you out of here, bro. Like you're blowing our.
Look at this.
Let me reach up there.
Yeah.
Oh wait, kung fu.
Here, I'm gonna pause it real quick. I'm gonna pause it real quick. So
we have to. We got to expand.
So I imagine this guy in the green that's doing this flip. Like when they're practicing, like, oh, this guy's got the shit, man. He nails every flip, and you can never tell, right? So he's like the practice king of flips. But then whenever they go to film it, he gets nervous and he spoofs it up and grabs his harness because he is the most.
He's Ray Finkel.
Yeah, terrible, man.
Yeah, he's the worst one out of them all. But yeah, again, Josh stated we'll post this somewhere. But the guy literally reaches up to grab, his harness, which is invisible. Again, it's complete fuckery to your point.
Then at the end, they do some
and then
sort of
at
like
the end,
pose to the
he
sky.
does like a little kung fu move, like, oh hey, I messed up, but I just realized that I fucked up again.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna make this little thing. So anyway.
And then it played. The next one is the same. I think it's the same guy getting his foot caught up in the harness as he comes around. In the black polo. That's the same guy, right? I think.
Yes, it is the same guy.
Right? Same goofy.
And then all he did was give this chick, like, we're gonna cut your hair pretty short, and we're just gonna put some mousse.
Right,
in it.
and then have this
to make sure it looks like it's standing
this
up.
This apple thing, this plush doll is gonna magically appear. Like, where's it coming from? Is it teleporting? What's going on here? And then
here's my man falling down.
Here's my guy right here, man. Oh, he's a little drunk. Oh,
hey, they told me. Wait. And we're 40. Oh, I wish everybody could see this.
Jeez.
That dude looked like Edward 40 Hands over there, man.
And there's more.
No, I gotta rewind back to that because, again, these guys are like on the ground. These suits are not, I don't know what they're made of. Like, I'm not an astronaut.
In the video, they look like tinfoil.
They can't be that. That's what I'm saying. They can't be that durable.
Yeah.
And this dude's out here like falling around. Yeah, like he's at 240.
I just got tired of faking weightlessness by using the zero-G plane, better known as the vomit comet. So in 2012, they started soliciting companies that specialize in real-time augmented virtual reality so that they can fake weightlessness and floating objects in the air in real time. Simply the cost of the plane and the safety concerns and the fact that they weren't very good at it. They didn't go to Hollywood, which most of Hollywood's effects are post-processing. That's after the video is made. They needed something they can do in real time and make it look realistic. And so I'll put this link in the description. They found a company called Telemetrics. Thank you, Debbie Durant, for bringing this to my attention. After I researched this, lo and behold, I found out our government has a contract with these people. And Telemetrics, basically what they do is they help news teams and they bring broadcasts together in real time, and they're able to create sets, cities, anything you want in a virtual reality world and make it look absolutely 100% real. They're also able to bring different people from around the world, put them in the same room and broadcast live, give them desks, whatever they need to make the broadcast. So it's a pretty amazing company. Here we see Johnson Space Center. Telemetrics provided latest camera robotics technology at NASA's government television at Mission Control. Why do you need to fake virtual reality sets at Mission Control and Johnson Space Center?
This is a very important video presentation for those that are on the fence, those that believe in so-called space travel. I'm going to show 3 different astronauts from 3 different countries dropping items in zero gravity, so-called zero gravity, aboard the ISS. So, again, this is so very important to understand. It's not just NASA, the US, that's pulling this deception off. It's all these world so-called space organizations. And let's get right to it with this Dutch astronaut Andre Kuipers. Let's take a listen to what he says here.
And you stick it to the wall. You know, we have tape everywhere to fix things. We have this kind of Velcro straps, so you can fix it around cables. And so you need all these things to keep your stuff in place, because otherwise you lose it. It just floats away and it doesn't fall down.
And it doesn't fall down, and that's very key and very important. Let's get right to it with Andre Kuipers during this tour aboard the so-called ISS.
Hier achter deze panelen wordt de urine opgevangen. En
I'm going to stop right there. And what he's pulling on is not an actual screw, it's a ring that's attached to this panel. And let's take a look at what happens here and take a very close listen to it drop. There he goes. Now he's going down, looking down for it. And very important, again, you see the rings. Here's a ring, and there's no ring here because it dropped. So again, getting back to what he said earlier.
You lose it. It just floats away, and it doesn't fall down.
And he says, again, it doesn't fall down, and we just saw that happen. Now, very interesting. Let's take a look here at this YouTube video. Now, I found this pretty hilarious with the Andre Kuipers tour, the US edition with the European Space Agency's official YouTube channel. Let's take a look here. Here's another heart. Love the screw drop. And you get a heart by the European Space Agency. It's not actual screw, it's the ring, but still, you see no other interaction. You get 2, and one is for the screw drop or the ring drop, and the other is for calling, again, Andre Kuipers legend. And again, all these other people saying how they love space travel, how amazing it is aboard the ISS. They're getting no response. I just find that pretty hilarious. And again, it's all about mockery. And here's just a little bit of a close-up of the heart from, again, the European Space Agency on YouTube. And here it is right here again. Unbelievable. This world we're living in. Nothing but lies. And moving on here with another astronaut, this Italian astronaut, Paolo Nespoli, as he drops a clip here. Let's take a look here. I'm going to play it in slow motion for those that might be questioning what I'm presenting. It's going to be clear as day. Let's take a look.
An Italian on the ISS, but
Drops.
we also have a lot of Italy on the station.
Now he just turns around. He doesn't know what to do.
How many parts?
Now let's stop here for a second and look at this slowly. I'm going to play it at 2 different slower speeds. Let's take a look at this one first. And obviously, he drops it in supposed zero gravity aboard the ISS.
An Italian
there he goes.
On the ISS, but we also have a lot of
He
Italy
turns
on
around
the
again.
station.
Now
How
here's
many
super
parts?
slow. And you're going to see him actually with his right hand kind of hit it, and it falls. And you see that smirk on his face as he turns around. He doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to react. So he kind of turns around for who knows whatever reason besides being completely embarrassed. Now, this, as we've seen so many times with the astronauts, they love to throw a microphone around in so-called outer space. Why not just be wireless? You know, what are we back, in the 70s or 80s still using these microphones? This is just a prop. And they're trying to show off their zero-G in so-called ISS. But again, nothing but smoke and mirrors, nonsense garbage from these frauds, these liars. Now watch this. As this one so-called astronaut is holding this inflatable globe. Let's play this clip and take a look at what happens. And he drops it. And look at the expressions from all the other so-called astronauts. And look at this face here, the one in the middle, the ringleader of this circus. Uh-oh, back up. Completely embarrassing. Let's take a closer look. And there he goes. And look at her face here as it drops. Oops, oops. Uh-oh. That's supposed to happen. Completely embarrassing. And when it comes down to, liars always expose themselves. They can't keep their lies straight. And this is transparent as transparent gets. But of course, the NASA fanboys, the SpaceX fanboys, they're not going to have anything to do with this. They're going to make every excuse in the book, of course, because once someone believes a lie, it's very hard to unbelieve a lie. And that's all comes down to ego. And ego is the biggest enemy of truth. And let's play a little bit closer even clip here as he drops it once again in supposed zero gravity. There's absolutely no excuse. It gets back to Andre Cooper, who says things do not drop in space. And oops. So look at the expression here coming up with these so-called astronauts, and their faces speak a million words as it drops. And look at the reaction. Look at her face specifically. This guy here starts smiling. They don't know what to do. And the smiles. You know, obviously they are completely embarrassed. Obviously not part of the script. And of course the foundation of the ISS, with Russia and the US docking supposedly in 1998, the two modules, and of course no real footage of the so-called ISS being constructed, because obviously it doesn't exist. It's all smoke and mirrors, nothing but a lie. And this is, again, the foundation of the world lie system, supposedly living on a spinning ball, zipping through outer space. And again, what it all comes down to is liars, again, can't keep their lies straight, and busted once again. And for those that cannot see the obvious fakery I just showed, and again, this is official NASA footage, supposedly, of the construction, obviously just CGI, and obviously they cannot show us real construction taking place because there is no ISS. There are no space travel missions. Again, people need to wake up and realize this whole world system is nothing but a lie.
So NASA admits they have no photos of Earth from space. They admit it. They admit that the photos that they have are made in Photoshop. The guy that made the blue marble said he made it in Photoshop from strips of data. Here's two shots from NASA. Look at the United States. It's twice the size over here, and this one's tilted back. So when you tilt something back, it gets smaller. It doesn't get bigger. That's crazy. But if you look at the other one, if you look at this one, and I show you, here's something that we could actually measure. We don't have to, trust airplanes and whatever. We can drive across Mexico and measure this distance on a boat and drive across Baja, and it's 934 miles. Science tells us the diameter, straight line through the Earth, is 7,917 miles. I should be able to fit 8.5 of these in between these two lines. 8.5 of those doesn't even fit on this page.
Jesus.
So either the Earth is tiny, half the continents don't exist, or NASA's lying, and that's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
Here's Jupiter. Two shots that are over 2 years apart, and every single cloud is the same. These are two shots from NASA. There's one, hey, we discovered the Northern Lights. Look at this, ridiculous. I could have done that better for them if they asked me. Okay? But every single cloud, see this little wispy cloud right here?
Yeah,
it's right there.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
It's the same
and the red spot.
Exact picture. They're too lazy to even make a new friggin' picture, right?
Yeah.
Either they're mocking us or, that's just them needing to let us know. Here's a close-up of these clouds here. They're stepped and repeated clouds. All of these things are stepped and repeated. Happens on all of their pictures. They use the same overlays again and again and again. It's
bizarre.
It's insanity, right? So, and our minds are easily tricked. Well, you see this is Jupiter, right? Okay. Is it Jupiter or is it a meadow with ducks. Okay, so I'm just saying how very easy it is. And then if we look at the space station,
yeah, that'd be good on the show.
If we look at, sorry about it. Sorry, I love doing that one.
We might have to steal that image off you
and put it on a shirt if that's okay.
The space station, they're constantly, everything they show us from the space station is a deception. So while I'm looking for that, this is us creating a Earth better than NASA, just doing it in Photoshop, and we could do that. But this goes all the way forward. We make a better looking Earth than NASA, so we do it in Photoshop. Here's a shot from the space station. How come we don't see any continents down here? What would you guys say if you were Globers?
It's just a bit over the sea.
It's over the sea, right? But we know it's a space station because we can see the solar panel. They always show us something like that.
Okay.
Or
they do.
Or with zero budget, did we just take the picture from our front yard and hold the solar panel? Okay, that's how easily we are fooled. They're doing.
This is Spiral Galaxy NGC 3982. What a gorgeous, naturally occurring object in our universe. Well, I mean, it ends up being gorgeous after all this work. And that's true of pretty much every photo you've ever seen of space. They're all photoshopped to perfection. And I'm sure you're wondering why they do it. They're just interpretations of our reality. These interpretations, however, are edited as NASA, the ESA, the Canadian Space Agency, and most, if not all other space agencies Photoshop the images they take of the universe around us. While the term photoshopping bears a lot of negative connotations, like models getting airbrushed to perfection or people faking experiences they never had, this is not the case with space.
Everything you get from NASA is real. It's real information in the real universe. Yes, the pictures are enhanced or altered, or the colors are changed, but it's done for real scientific reasons, not just because we feel like it, and definitely not because we feel like making things up.
That's Dr. Paul Sutter, an astrophysicist at The Ohio State University and host of the podcast Ask a Spaceman.
I was watching Star Trek Enterprise. I'm a Star Trek fan. I admit it. I'm a Trekkie or Trekker, depending on how you look at it. But whatever. I'm watching this episode called North. I think it was the episode called North Star, which was season 3, episode 9, I believe. It aired November 12, 2003. And toward the end of it, they bring one of the settlers of this planet up onto the ship to show them, that they live on a planet. And there's the shot that they show of the planet, and I'm going to have to do a screenshot of this and check it for myself because it looks almost identical to one of the pictures allegedly taken on the ISS. And it's a pretty famous one. It's the one where the sun's just out of the top of the frame. You can sort of just see like a little bit of a lens flare of the sun up at the top of the frame, and you got this perfect curved Earth in the background there, and the sun is like reflecting on the ocean and the cloud. I mean, it's actually a beautiful picture. But in one of the shots, you can see the camera that he used to take that picture. And in Photoshop, there's some filters that allow you to correct for barrel distortion if you know the camera and the lens that was used. So if you punch in the camera and the lens that he said he used to take that picture and you hit the filter to correct for barrel distortion, it ends up being flat. That's the desktop background that I have on my laptop. I have the flattened version from the filter on Photoshop being applied to it. But it looks, I mean, that's why it caught my eye. It's because I see it all the time as a desktop on my laptop, but here I'm watching Star Trek and it looks like the same picture is being used in 2003 as a CGI effect, to show a planet. And so I'm going, okay, wait a minute, is this, do we have a situation of life imitating art, or is art just being used to create the fantasy of what we think is life? I don't know, but I'm looking at everything a lot differently than I did before.
And that gets into what you see here with Wernher von Braun in his tombstone. where it has the Bible verse, Psalms 19:1, where the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Very interesting for a man that's head of rocketry when it comes to NASA basically from the inception. But again, for those that understand the whole concept of the firmament, this is the biblical cosmology here. As you can see, the firmament is the structure above the atmosphere, conceived as a vast solid dome, the biblical cosmology. Just like as you see here with the domed earth, and that's probably a better term than saying flat earth, because there's definitely peaks and valleys, but definitely there is a structure above us. This is why we have this pressurized system. And I find it very interesting, the concepts from NASA, just like the space shuttle called Atlantis, like we are within Atlantis. And this is again biblical, with all these Bible verses, as you can see here, pointing in that direction. If you're a Bible believer, the waters above, the waters below, the ends of the earth mentioned 50 times. Earth is immovable mentioned several times, as you can see here. The sun, moon, and stars under the firmament, not outside, within the firmament. So people might say this is just a depiction, but this depiction matches our observed reality.